Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. So if folks could grab their seats, we're going to get started. So I just want to thank you all for coming this evening. It's always a great honor for Springfield to show up to these kinds of events and make sure their voices are heard. But before we get started, we're going to have a short program by the Community Music School. So let's welcome them with a round of applause.
This land is your land. This land Hi, I'm Juliana Segura, and I'm going to be singing Rise Up by Andrew Day. You're broken down and tired of living life on a merry-go-round, and you can't find the fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out and mountains, we gon' walk it out and mountains. And I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. And I'll rise up, high like the waves, I'll rise up, in spite of the ache, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you. And the silence isn't quiet, and it feels like it's getting hard to breathe. And I know you feel like dying. Promise we'll bring the world to its feet and mountains, bring it to its feet and mountains. And I'll rise up, I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up, I'll rise unafraid, I'll rise up, and I'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you, for you. All we need is hope, and for that we have each other, and for that we have each other. And we will rise, we will rise, we will rise up. We'll rise, and I'll rise up, rise like the day, I'll rise up, in spite of the ache. I will rise 1,000 times again. And we'll rise up, high like the waves, we'll rise up, in spite of the ache, we'll rise up, and we'll do it 1,000 times again. For you, for you, for you,
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming.
Good evening. Or as in Italian, we'd say buonasera. Welcome to Forest Park Middle School. Let's give a big round of applause to the Community Music School of Springfield. Eileen McCaffrey and the young ladies and young men do such a tremendous job here in Springfield. Also to our host, the outstanding principal of Forest Park Middle School. Put your hands together for Tommy Mazza. Principal Mazza. And that young lady that sung the national anthem is a staffer for Senator Markey. Senator Markey, you better be paying her some more money for singing a song that way. Am I correct? I'm joined here by our hardworking police department led by Commissioner John Barbieri. Through his efforts, we've decreased crime by nearly 20% in the city of Springfield. John and I, unfortunately, have to leave shortly for the wake and funeral services for Trooper Sergeant Mike Andrews, a Springfield native who passed away unexpectedly a few days ago. So we'll be leaving shortly after this town hall meeting. We have a number of elected officials are here. First, State Representative Brian Ash, who happened to go to junior high school here, 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. State Rep Brian Ash. Springfield City Councilor Adam Gomez. Let's see Adam. Oh, Adam's there, okay. Another colleague and friend of mine, Springfield School Committee woman, Barbara Gresham. Barb is here. Holyoke School Committee, Devin Sheehan is here. Devin, I saw walk in. Chicopee City Council, Sharon Jewell is here. Okay. Ludlow School Committee, Jake Oliveira, who sits on the state board. I know we have some state committee people. I know Candy Glazier is here, and Mr. Clark Barr is here for Senator Lesser. If I missed anyone from the notes that were given to be a mistake of the mind and not of the heart, but we deeply appreciate you being here. Now for what you have been waiting for, to have Senator Ed Markey here come to the city of Springfield. He's been a good friend to the city, to Western Mass, and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and the nation. He has frequently been by here. And he's a blue-collar type guy. From Malden, an old basketball player, and he is a guy that is fighting on the front lines for something that is affecting each and every one of our families, unfortunately. The scourge of opioid crisis, fentanyl that is occurring, and he wants to be able to deal with this, more importantly, on the health aspect. He's also been very helpful to me in continuing to fight for CDBG funds. Those funds are a lifeline to urban mayors for jobs, youth development, housing, training, economic development. So we're so happy that the senator has taken the time to come out once again to Springfield, Massachusetts. So let's put your hands together for a warm welcome for our senator, our friend, Senator Ed Markey.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here. And Mr. Mayor, you know, you talk about basketball, and my skills were, I was a good shooter, but my horizontal and vertical weren't as strong as I would wish that they could be. But I will tell you one thing, the mayor is the point guard of this incredible revival of the city of Springfield. You can feel it every single day. You can feel what is happening in this city. And I just want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being my friend and for being the great leader, which you are. You can feel it with the $3 billion in the MGM casino, with Union Station, with just street after street. You can begin to feel this incredible surge of optimism as the unemployment rate comes down and opportunities open up. But here's the one thing I know about you, and the one thing I know about the city of Springfield: you're not happy. There's more work to be done. And all I can tell you is that I want to be here and partnering with you on the floor of the United States Senate, because this city is just, it's the city of Indian motorcycle. It's the city that invented the monkey wrench. It's the Basketball Hall of Fame. And it is a city of first, a city of invention, and all of the surrounding communities as well play into this incredible history, which is just getting started in the 21st century. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everything which you do for Western Massachusetts. Brian Ash, thank you for being here. It means the world to me that you are here, and all of the other city councilors and school committee people from all of the surrounding communities as well. Barbara Gresham and Devin Sheehan, Sharon Jewell, Adam Gomez, Jake Oliveira, all of you, it means the world to me that you are here, because this is a very important, critical time in American history. And it's why I've come out here, because I want to hear from you, and I also want to tell you what's going on in Washington at the same time, because we're getting a little August break right now, little August break from PTSD, from post-Trump stress syndrome, right? We all need a little break. We just had this fantastic victory that spared our healthcare system a grievous wound that the president otherwise would have been able to inflict upon our political system. Bay State Medical, 12,000 jobs here in Springfield. Providence Hospital, 4,000 jobs. That's 16,000 jobs inside of the city of Springfield that would have been significantly adversely impacted if Medicaid was slashed, if the exchanges where people go to get their health care had collapsed. And we were, last week at 1 in the morning, saved by 3 Republican senators who were willing to join with 48 Democrats to say no to this radical attempt to undermine our healthcare system. So I've been in Congress a long time, but the #1 vote I've ever cast, the vote to put the Affordable Care Act on the books so that health care was accessible for everyone. The second most important vote I ever cast was last Friday morning at 1:30 to make sure that the Affordable Care Act was not repealed. So that is now going to be a challenge for Democrats and Republicans alike, that we must now come together. We have to find a way of working together to make sure that the insurance industry doesn't walk away from providing health care for everyone, that there's enough funding that goes into the system so that people can be insured under the insurance policies that they can receive from the federal government. Some of these families need a little extra subsidy in order to make sure that it works, but if they get it, then this health care system can be better than it ever was. But there's going to be a battle because there's an ideological opposition to this. There's an ancient animosity that many of these right-wing Republicans feel. They felt it towards Social Security, they felt it towards Medicare, they feel it towards Medicaid, they feel it towards the Affordable Care Act. They want to leave these medical programs as debt-soaked relics of what they are today. And what we have to do is continue to fight, to continue to stand up, to continue to ensure that the voices of ordinary families across this country are heard, and that is what happened in the United States Congress last week. The voices of the American people were heard on the floor of the United States Senate. So this is a pivotal time. I'm becoming a little bit more optimistic that some of the Republicans in the Senate are starting to say, well, maybe we should work together. Maybe we should try to find a way on a bipartisan basis of putting together a program that can ensure that the entire healthcare system is not put under the kind of assault it's been for the first 6 months. And maybe this little break in August will help people to put aside that acrimony and bitterness, which unfortunately has been too characteristic of this first 7 months of the Trump administration. That's my hope. On other issues like climate change, sometimes I think the president gets his climate change science from Trump University, and it's as bogus as a degree from Trump University. But what we know is that the Koch brothers, oil companies, coal companies, they continue to fuel this bad science that unfortunately the president acceded to and led to him pulling out of the Paris Agreement. The United States was the leader in bringing together all of the countries so that we could have that agreement, but he, as president, then decided, Donald Trump, to pull us out. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about what he did. There are 50,000 coal miners left in the United States. Last year, 50,000 new solar jobs were created in 1 year. 1 year. By the year 2020, there will be 500,000 people working in the wind and solar industry. And what are those jobs? Those are jobs for electricians up on roofs. Those are jobs for roofers. Those are jobs for steel workers. Those are jobs for people who put things together, who work hard. This green energy revolution is the single greatest blue-collar job creation engine that we have seen in generations in the United States of America. And the president just wants to hand it over to the Chinese, hand it over to the Indians, hand it over to the Germans. And they're saying, thank you so much, Mr. President, for bringing the world together to lower greenhouse gases. Now they're going to have to buy solar and wind to do it, and we will be able, as the Chinese government and their companies, to be able to make these things for the world. It is a very bad business plan. If you're trying to create blue-collar jobs in our country, there hasn't been anything like this in generations. It's going to be at 500,000, then it will go to 1 million jobs, but we have to have a plan. The Chinese have a plan. We don't have a plan as long as Donald Trump is there on climate change. And someone with a plan will always beat someone without a plan every single time. And so for me, I am going to be down there fighting every single day to make sure that we get a chance to take advantage of this blue-collar, job-creating engine. Because that is what the mayor was talking about. The mayor was talking about this need to ensure that we think about that blue-collar worker in the country and to make sure those jobs are being created for them. And the president continues to think in terms of the 19th century or the 20th century. He said he was elected to represent Pittsburgh and not Paris. Did you hear what he said? And what happened the next day? The mayor of Pittsburgh says, "You don't represent me. We believe in wind. We believe in solar. We believe in climate science. We're a city that's moved on. We're looking at the future, like Springfield, looking at the future, trying to be optimistic about what can happen in the years ahead to provide jobs for the next generation." The president has established, unfortunately, the worst record for a first-term president in terms of achievements in the history of the United States of America. There have been no major pieces of legislation which have passed. Let me amend that. On the day that we were able to defeat his repeal of the Affordable Care Act, Democrats and Republicans came together to vote to put sanctions on Russia, but not to give Donald Trump the ability to be able to waive those sanctions, because the American people don't trust Donald Trump to be tough enough on Russia. So on his two big issues, his number one foreign policy issue and his number one domestic issue, he lost both of them on the same day, just a week ago, in the United States Senate. Just absolutely unbelievable, unprecedented. So it's not as though people don't want to work together where it is possible, and we did so on those sanctions. But we have to have a working environment that isn't constantly challenging the soul of the American people, isn't constantly saying, that there's this huge divide between people, that it's us against them, that it's people who come from this part of the country against people who come from that part of the country, rather than thinking of us all as the same, as being good Americans, and not being able to castigate people just for what they believe in or what they're saying. And when the president introduces a budget that zeroes out all funding for the National Endowment for the Arts, zeroes out all funding for the National Endowment for the Humanities, you know what we have to invite him to do? To come here to hear the community music school sing. Huh? Do we really want to zero out this budget for the arts and humanities, or do we want to encourage it? And by the way, Christina Warner on my staff, who sang the Star Spangled Banner, wasn't she great in doing that before we started? I had no musical ability at all. The nuns used to make me promise I would mouth the words, but no sound would come out when we were singing the Tantum Ergo Sacramentum Vene Remor Cernui. So this whole set of issues that we're talking about just goes to what is going to be necessary as the years go by, the next 3.5 years of Donald Trump being president. And we're just going to have to fight every single day. We're going to have to stand up every single day. We're going to have to do everything that is necessary, that he knows that there's another point of view. And I was reading in the paper that the new Dr. Seuss Museum opened in May here in Springfield, and I decided to go and do a little refresher course on Dr. Seuss, also known as Ted Geisel, who is from Springfield. And here's the poem that I think I've found that really goes to the heart of democracy and who we are. And it goes like this: you have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes. You can steer yourself any direction you choose. So it's the American people who have to choose here to continue to steer the direction. And we just saw that on Russia. We just saw that on healthcare. And Mark Kerouac, who is here tonight, who is the CEO of Bay State Health, he and all of the hospitals, all of the insurance companies, all the doctors, all of the physicians, all of the hospital workers, the SEIU, everybody came together to steer us away from that repeal of health care. But it came from the grassroots of our country. And that's what we're going to have to continue to do as each and every day goes by. So I think what might make some sense here is that if people want, they can go to the microphones and we can take some questions from people if you would like. And the Congress is a stimulus response institution, and there's nothing more stimulating than a whole bunch of people lined up at the microphone ready to ask questions of their elected representatives. So yes, sir.
Saul Feinstein, Vice Chair of the Longmeadow Democratic Town Committee. Thank you for coming to Springfield, and thank you for the great work you do in the Senate in Washington. But we have issues in the state, and I'd like to talk to you about one of them. You know, Senator Eric Lesser works hard on many goals, but the goal of the East-West Speed Rail. We wonder what support you can give us, because we're running into a little bit of a roadblock, not to make that into a pun, but could you be in any way supportive to help us get that railway, which will do well for Massachusetts?
Well,
thank you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you for being here. Thank you for your great work. Yes, I support the East-West Rail. I want to see that happen. And Brian, yeah, we need that out here, Brian Ash. Huh? We need that built. And back in December of 2015, Democrats and Republicans came together. I serve on the Infrastructure Committee, and we put together a bill for infrastructure that gave Massachusetts $5 billion, $1 billion a year for 5 years in a row, including this year, which the governor can use to plan transportation projects. But you can't fund every single project, even though it's $5 billion coming in from the federal government. So Donald Trump keeps saying that he wants a big $1 trillion infrastructure program. I would like a $1 trillion infrastructure program, and I serve on the Infrastructure Committee. And I've begun to have Republicans come over to me and say that they would like to work on an infrastructure bill. Now, if we can pass a $1 trillion infrastructure bill, it would put a lot of people back to work. A lot of people building roads and bridges and building new rail transit, new airports across the country, but also money that can be used for the East-West Rail project, okay? So that is what I'm going to be working on over the next 2 years, so that that money can come back to Massachusetts for the jobs, for people in this region, but also so that you can get in and out of Springfield in a way that reflects a modern transportation system. And if that happens, the sky is the limit for Springfield, and I want to be a part of making that possible. So let's come over here.
Hi, my name is Karen Lee. I live in Springfield, and behind me is our revolution.
Beautiful.
Massachusetts.
Beautiful.
Woo! So thank you for hosting the event tonight.
Thank you.
And our revolution, Massachusetts, as well as throughout the country, has been going around an initiative called Summer for Progress. And it is a people's platform of, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, I'm trying to read it, yeah.
Okay.
Summer of Progress, summerforprogress.com, yes.
Yes, please, thank you for that plug, because I was going to ask if everyone could go on there and sign the petition online, and you should have a flyer that also has the information. So thank you, Senator, for that. So the platform is 8 bills that has been sponsored in the House. And on the Senate side, 3 of those bills have been sponsored, and Senator Bernie Sanders will be introducing Medicare for All in a couple weeks. So my question to you is, there are 8 bills, and like I said, 3 companion bills for the Senate. So first of all, it means a lot that you have sponsored the Raise the Wage Act for $15 an hour, so thank you. Shout out for the senator for that. And so the other 2 remaining that are in the Senate right now is the College for All Act and, oh my God, see, I just, the Wall Street tax. Who could forget that? The Wall Street tax. So my question to you is, will you co-sponsor the remaining 2 bills as well as the Medicare for All and do what you can about introducing the remaining bills, which are the Each Woman Act, the Automatic Voter Registration Act, Justice is Not a Sale for Act, and the Climate Justice, which will be coming up. And I'm complete. Thank you.
Yeah, the 8 bills would require me to read them. I mean, everyone else would expect me to read them before I co-sponsor them. But let's just go down the concept. Medicare for all, I support. College for all. Honestly, I was paying back my student loans, and I was 5 years in Congress paying back my student loans. So without affordable access to college, if your father's driving a milk truck for the Hood Milk Company, or you're any kid today, because college costs far more now than it cost when I was a kid, but I know one thing, I wasn't any smarter than my mother or father, and I didn't work any harder than them, but I had access to it. And what made it accessible is the student loan program and the Pell Grants and all of these other programs that help to make it affordable. So I do agree with you that it's absolutely essential that we have a program like that. On climate justice, I haven't actually read the bill that you're referring to, but oh, it's because I can't read something that doesn't exist yet. That's exactly right. That's an obstacle. But of course I'm going to support that goal. You know, and I'll have to look at the details because we just have that responsibility before you sign on to a bill because I represent the whole state. But in general, of course I support the concepts of each one of those titles that you have just laid out. And it's a progressive vision because we are a revolutionary state. It's the revolution. That's who we are. The American Revolution started here. It started here in Massachusetts. We started it. The abolitionist movement started here in Massachusetts. The suffragette movement started here in Massachusetts. The Freedom Riders went south from Massachusetts first. To ensure voting rights in the South. The Affordable Care Act started here. We called it Romney Care. The gay marriage movement started here in Massachusetts. So we are the revolutionary state. And so these new 8 bills are just part of that whole tradition. So why don't we talk about the actual details? But of course, on the concepts, I support. And I will meet with you, of course. And thank you. It's why I'm here, to make sure that you have access. Yes?
Senator Bishop Talbert Swan, Springfield NAACP, was pleased to host you at my church when you were running.
I love that.
And certainly glad to support you. 2 things I want to ask you. First, you're aware of the fact that in 2013, basically the Voting Rights Act of 1965 was gutted because the formula that determined what states would be monitored was gutted, and so today we have no enforcement of the Voting Rights Act. We know that it's critical in the upcoming elections for voters not to be disenfranchised, especially if we're going to get Trump out of the White House. We've got to be able to go to the polls and vote. So that Voting Rights Act is critical. It needs to be restored. What is Congress going to do in terms of the Voting Rights Act? Then the second question I have, you're championing the opioid crisis that we have, and I applaud you for that. But for many years, the war on drugs really amounted to a war on African American people, on poor people. It fueled mass incarceration. And there are many people who, because of the crack epidemic, the opioid crisis that preceded the modern day crisis, that wound up not getting detox, not getting help, but wound up behind bars because of mandatory minimum sentencing, et cetera. And now that we have this more compassionate stance, the question is, what happens to all of those individuals who yet languish behind bars or whose lives have been ruined because of the war on drugs? What happens to those who went to jail for distributing marijuana when now folk can distribute it for profit? What happens to those individuals, and what is Congress going to do to address that?
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you, Reverend. And I love being in your church. I hated trying to preach right after you preached in that church. You're just such a formidable man. So, on the second question, there is a big epidemic now across the country, opioids. It's affecting every race, every income group, and increasingly we're realizing that we're not going to be able to imprison our way out of the problem, that we're going to have to provide treatment if we're going to get out of this problem. And the deeper we get into this realization is the more that we also realize that America owes an apology to 2 million African American young men in the 1990s who we put in prison and did not give them the treatment which they needed. They now have records. Some of them are still in prison. We need prison reform. I talked to Cory Booker about this. I talked to other members of the Senate on a bipartisan basis. Rand Paul is actually interested in this issue. We have to find a way of providing real justice to all of those African American young men, not so young anymore for many of them, who were in prison and whose lives were adversely impacted in a way that we can never fully make up to them. There's just no way, but we can at least try to get them some justice and try to get those people who are still in prison out of prison and into a more normalized life. The whole idea of 3 strikes and you're out is one of the single worst criminal justice ideas of all time, and it was just used as a way of putting these young African American men into prison. On the issue of opioids even further, we need to fully finance it. What was in the main Republican bill that we were going to vote on, that ultimately we were able to defeat, was to cut opioid coverage from $90 billion a year to $45 billion a year. So what was the chance that we were going to be successful in providing more treatment for people with opioids if they were going to cut the $90 billion in Obamacare and replace it with $45 billion from Trump Care? Because a vision without funding is an hallucination. If you're not going to fund the treatment programs, then you will never be able to take care of that problem. Now, on voting rights, we're increasingly having a crisis of democracy in America. When the president is asking every single Secretary of State in America to send the voting rolls from their states down to Washington for inspection by people who are looking for voter fraud, when there is no evidence that it is occurring in any meaningful way in any state in America, at the same time that the president is denying that the Russians were trying to engage in fraudulent activity and is calling that a hoax, shows how intent they are in trying to discourage minority voters especially from turning out at the polls. And it is time for us to turn that issue into a central issue for the American people to have to deliberate upon. And the evidence begins with the naming of Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General of the United States, because his record on these issues is poor. His intent to actually rectify the problem rather than making it worse is very clear. So I agree with you 100%. Those two issues really go to the heart of whether or not we are going to provide real social justice in our country to everyone and not just the privileged few. And so I give you my pledge on both of those issues, on criminal justice reform and on voting rights, that it will be at the top of my priority list. And it means the world to me that you're here this evening, too, Reverend. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Carrie Rodriguez, and my title is...
Can you speak up a little bit more?
My title is Mom-in-Chief of Massachusetts Parents United. And we're a union of parents that we started with our friend Andy Stern, and we have organized over 7,000 parents across the Commonwealth around safer neighborhoods, around affordable housing, around food stability, and equitable access to high-quality education. And frankly, our organization is about 74% Latino. Latino. And our families are under attack right now on a very basic level. Our families are being broken apart. The immigration crisis that we have in this country right now is tearing our families apart. We live terrorized on a regular basis. So many of the families that are a part of Massachusetts Parents United. And now we have our governor, Charlie Baker, playing patty cake with Donald Trump. So every single day, we have parents who are living in fear in our neighborhoods. In addition, we have a Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, who is sending us down the track to crazy town in terms of education and just threatens to destroy our entire public education system. So I'm here on behalf of these families, asking you to keep us top of mind, because every single day, parents in Massachusetts are struggling. Children in Massachusetts cannot concentrate in school, wondering about whether or not mom or dad is going to be there when they get home. You can't ask a child to concentrate on learning in an environment like that. We have families who are afraid to use our food banks because they don't have social security numbers. They don't know where ICE is going to be. They live in a crisis. They feel terrorized. So please think of us, think of these families, and please, if you could send a message, tell us how you're going to fight for these families down in Washington against what we view as our worst nightmare.
Okay, thank you. Well, the President made a promise, the Secretary of Homeland Security made a promise that they weren't going to go after families that weren't creating any problems, that if there weren't any crimes being committed, that they were going to be too busy going after the bad hombres. That's what the President said. But what they're doing now is saying to families who have children who are born here that if ICE can find you and grab you as the parents, they're going to send you back. And the children who are here are American citizens. So I agree with you. How can we have children who are afraid that when they come home from school, their mother or father might be gone? How can we have parents who are afraid to take their children to Mass because there might be someone at the Mass pointing out the mother or father as someone who is deportable? So we have 11 million people in this country who should be a part of a comprehensive immigration reform bill that gives them a pathway to citizenship. And that's really what the President should be talking about. Instead of injecting fear into the hearts of millions of innocent people all across this country. I was with a man, I did a press conference in Boston about 3 weeks ago with a man who works at MIT. He lives in Chelsea. He came here from Dominican. He's got 3 children born here, and his mother is actually an American citizen, but he is not. And they have now grabbed him. A man who works 40 hours a week at MIT, who has his own little small business on the side, who's raising 3 children, whose mother's going to be a citizen next week, and they're saying he has to leave America. What threat is he to our country? What possible justification can they have for characterizing him as a bad hombre? We should be creating a system where we have a pathway for these people to go through in order to become citizens. Instead, the president insists on $25 billion for a new wall across our Mexican border. And by the way, we are not going to let him get that $25 billion. And he also wants 7,000 new deportation officers. Well, his promise is to go after the bad hombres. If there are drug dealers, if there are criminals, go after them. Everyone wants them to be apprehended. The people who live in the community want them to be apprehended. But do not go after these innocent people. So we're going to have a mighty battle and he's now named the head of Homeland Security as the new chief of staff in the White House. So I agree with you 100%, and I also agree with you, by the way, on Betsy DeVos. It was hard to choose which of Donald Trump's cabinet nominees were the worst. But I think Betsy DeVos is at the top of the list because it goes right to the heart of the public education system that has served our country for 150 years, since Horace Mann here in Massachusetts invented it, the father of public education. So thank you for coming. Yes, ma'am?
My name's Christine Tatro. I'm a resident of Springfield, and I was glad you brought up the president's new immigration bill. The New York Times, I believe it was, posted the criteria today and invited people to take the test. I've been a practicing attorney for 25 years. I own 2 businesses of my own. I teach technological subject matter at Western New England University, and I would not qualify for immigration. So that just gives you an idea of, also I speak fluent English and a couple of other languages. So that just shows you where the mindset is for that. But my question to you actually has to do with health care. We're not out of the woods with that yet. Obviously, some changes have to be made. The president and some of the Republicans have said, well, we just won't fund the exchanges. The president in particular has just said, I won't do it. So I have a couple of questions, one of which is, can the president make that determination, that decision on his own as part of his executive powers? And secondly, what are your ideas about strengthening the Affordable Care Act?
Excellent. So Lamar Alexander is the chairman of the Health Committee. He's from Tennessee. He's a conservative. What he announced on the day after we were successful in blocking the repeal of the Affordable Care Act was that he now wanted to work with Patty Murray, who's the lead Democrat on the Health Committee, in ensuring that there will be funding for the exchanges so that people can have access to the help which they need to pay the insurance industry for the insurance coverage, for fear that if they weren't, then the insurance industry would just pull out of state after state providing no insurance coverage, and as a result, watch a collapse of that marketplace. So I'm becoming a little bit more optimistic that some Republicans, as they just did on the Russia sanctions bill, are starting to distance themselves from Donald Trump, because he just makes an ideological statement, makes this commitment, and then he never wavers, which is not how Congress works. And by the way, I think it's very reassuring in the last couple of weeks to listen to so many Republicans in Congress announce that they've just learned that there are 3 branches of government, and Congress is one of them, and they're independent of the president. So increasingly, you hear more and more of these Republicans making that statement, and hopefully on health care, that will be the case. And we'll have to work our way through that, and then find ways of having healthier, more healthy, and young people get into the system to make sure that we find ways of lowering the costs, which we have to. Here in Massachusetts, 98% of all people now have coverage, but we're still working hard to lower the costs. We know it's not easy, but if we did a poll, how many of you would like to repeal the healthcare system here in Massachusetts? How many of you would like to work harder in order to make sure that the costs of the healthcare system go down? So that's where America increasingly has moved, and that's what our task is going to be in Washington, to find ways of working together in order to accomplish that goal. So thank you for being here. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Kendall Akers, and I am a proud member of Local 1199, the SEIU Healthcare Workers. So my question to you would be, we would like to know how we can continue to fight and support you to defend Obamacare, because basically, we the healthcare workers, this is how we earn our living. So we have to fight not only for ourselves, our children, but also for the rights of our consumers. So what can we do to continue to support you and defend Obamacare?
Okay, well, what happened this year was that right after Trump took office, 180,000 people showed up in Boston Common saying, we are going to stand and fight. Elizabeth Warren and I decided on Wednesday of the next week that we would have a health care rally at Faneuil Hall. We started on Wednesday. 9,000 people showed up on Sunday at noontime. When there was a Muslim ban, which the president put into place, and going into effect on a Saturday, 2,000 people showed up at Logan Airport, including many lawyers who came over to try to begin to help these people who otherwise were going to be incarcerated. And the next day, Elizabeth and I spoke to 15,000 people at Copley Plaza that showed up overnight to protest. So, and even on January 5th, I think, of this year, out in Pittsfield, on the 75th anniversary of the 4 freedoms of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 2,000 people marched in 7-degree weather over to a church where 1,000 of them then had to stand outside as I spoke inside with Richie Neal, your great Congressman Richie Neal, as we spoke in Pittsfield. So my answer to you is, this is our era. This is our fight. Some people say, oh, I wish I was around in the 60s. You know, that must have been really a great time to be fighting. I wish I was around in the 30s for the New Deal. Well, let me say this to you. Every single issue that has a law on the books that was put there by all preceding generations, Donald Trump would like to try to repeal every one of them. So your job is even bigger than any of the preceding eras, because we're going to have to protect every one of those laws. And we're going to have to make sure that he goes down as one of the most unsuccessful presidents in American history. So all I can say to you, SEIU, is just keep up what you've been doing. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yes, good evening. My name is Andrew Morehouse, the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts, and I just wanted to say I applaud the priorities you introduced. Indeed, everybody needs access to health care. Everybody needs to live on a planet that supports human life, obviously. And we need national defense that also protects the sanctity of our electoral system. I wanted to add a 4th priority among many others that certainly exist, and I know you know where I'm going with this one: food. Simply put, people gotta eat. And of course, we'd like to see those 500,000 jobs that you spoke about, and many, many hundreds of thousands of others that will support families through wages that support their families, so that they don't have to come and stand on a line in the heat or in the cold to get food assistance. But that is the reality, that over 223,000 people last year in the 4 counties of Western Massachusetts had to do just that, stand on a line to seek food assistance so that they can support their families, feed their children, feed their elders, and even themselves if they're working a full-time job on minimum wage. So we know that there's a lot we can do in this society to prevent people having to stand on a line for food, and we completely support that. Having said that, there are people who continue to need that assistance. Since the Great Recession, the numbers spiked to the level I just referenced, and it hasn't declined since then. So until that time comes when we can shorten the line, we need your support. And we know that the federal nutrition programs are vital to the workings of not only the food banks, but many of our partners, 200 strong, in communities across Western Massachusetts, including Reverend Talbot Swan's ministry, and Lorraine Soup Kitchen and Pantry. Andrea Marion, the executive director, is here, and many, many others. I would venture to say there are people in this room, some of them you'd be surprised to know, seek food or have sought food assistance. Food banks can do their job with our partners, but we can't do it without the support of the TFAP program, which I'm sure you're familiar with, the Emergency Food Assistance Program that provides food to food banks, and more importantly, honestly, the SNAP program, without which we would be overwhelmed, and 40+ million individuals who receive that benefit, over 150,000 in Western Massachusetts, would be standing on a line, and we wouldn't be able to help them. So we need you to protect the SNAP program, and in so doing, help support these families and our local economy, through which, as you know, hundreds of millions of dollars flow in SNAP benefits to support our local businesses. And I trust we can expect your support. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you. And thank all of the food pantries all across Massachusetts, all across the country that fill this incredible void. So I'll tell you this little story. So this is the difference between the House and the Senate in this era. When the Republicans took over the House of Representatives, they only need a bare majority. And so my very last vote in my entire career in the House of Representatives, after all of the votes which I had cast, was on an $80 billion cut in food stamps, the SNAP program, $80 billion. Now, the draconian, mean-spirited, and ultimately cruel goal which they had was to just make it harder for all of these poor families to access the nutrition which they needed for their families. So I'll give you another number. 50% of all children in the United States will be on food stamps at some point in their life. I'll give you that number. Huh? That's an unbelievable fact. And so you can vote 2 ways in the House of Representatives. All 435 names go up on the board. You can see your name, and then you can take out a card that's electronic, and then you can push green or red, yes or no. But on my last vote, on my last day in the United States Congress before I moved over to the Senate in July of 2013, all of a sudden the Black Caucus members came down into the well, and they wanted to vote the other way, which is you just can pick up a card and you write your actual name on it and the state you come from and the number of your district. And so one by one, all of the Black Caucus members and all of the Hispanic Caucus members came down into the well. So I decided that will be my final vote. I'll go down in the well with the Black Caucus and the Hispanic Caucus and cast this vote. And all I can tell you is I was hearing some words uttered by especially the Black Caucus and the Latino Caucus women that I don't think I had heard as they were describing what they felt about the Speaker of the House putting this vote up. And we lost. But I made my final vote by writing in that red card and putting it there right on the desk so the Speaker could see it. The next day, I went over to the Senate, and in the Senate, Harry Reid, the leader of the Democrats, said, "That bill is dead. They don't have the votes over here. They need 60 votes over here in the Senate. That bill is dead." And so, for me, that was the beginning of making my move from the House to the Senate worthwhile, so that we could stop this incredible cruelty that otherwise would be perpetrated, including the repeal of the Affordable Care Act, because if there was no Senate, that would have already been repealed as well. They passed that repeal a month ago. So thank you for what you're doing, and I give you my pledge that it is at the very top of my priority list to make sure that there is a fair distribution of this food that we have in America into the hands of those who need it the most. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Brenda Lopez. I live in Springfield, Ward 6. You've talked about a lot of issues, and you said that Donald Trump and his administration haven't passed any meaningful legislation, any meaningful bills, but we're watching rollbacks every day on from how the coal companies can dump sludge into our rivers and streams, on what can be done in national parks. All of these rollbacks of the issues that the American people have asked for, that we believe we as citizenry deserve. Why are Democrats sitting silently as the lobbyists and the Trump administration are taking away all of our protections, most especially our environmental protections? Thank you.
That is an excellent question. So thus far, with the exception of a couple of rulemakings, which Barack Obama promulgated in the final 6 months of his administration, we have been successful in blocking Donald Trump legislatively. However, he controls the Department of Interior, the Department of Energy, the Department of the EPA, and so what he did was he named Scott Pruitt as the head of the EPA. Scott Pruitt, as Attorney General of Oklahoma, sued the EPA 19 times. In the confirmation hearing, I said, Attorney General Pruitt, will you recuse yourself from any deliberations on any of the issues that you actually sued the EPA on? He said no. I said to him, Mr. Pruitt, that because you will not recuse yourself, that makes you the plaintiff, the defendant, the judge, and the jury on the key environmental issues: sludge, clean air, clean water, soot, and you will now be deciding as the head of the EPA. Over at the Department of Energy, Rick Perry, who forgot that he wanted to abolish the Department of Energy when he was running for president. He is now the head of the Department of Energy, and probably a very appropriate person to be named as the head of the Department of Energy, since he doesn't want anyone to remember that it ever existed. And he is a climate denier as well. As the Secretary of State, he named the CEO of ExxonMobil, at the Department of Interior. He named a congressman from Montana who is right now trying to figure out a way of giving away the coal resources for bargain basement prices to the coal industry so they can export it outside of the United States of America. So in each and every one of those instances where the regulatory process is totally under the control of an administration, I get up every week. I chair a group called the Clearinghouse on Climate Change, and I bring Democrats together. We meet on these issues, and then we battle trying to highlight as best we can this crime against the environment that any 1 week that the Republicans are seeking to perpetrate, to the Trump administration administratively. So I agree with you. At the core of this is who put up the money for Trump to win, for the Republicans to win. It's the oil industry, it's the coal industry, it's the fossil fuel industry. That's where the money principally came from. And so to the extent to which you have put your finger right on it, I can promise you that I battle every day on these environmental issues. We're trying to highlight what Pruitt is doing, what Zinke is doing, what Perry is doing, and what others are doing to our environment, because it's within their discretion to do so. And what's going to happen, just so you know, is that the NRDC and the Sierra Club have raised more money in the first 7 months of 2017 than they have in any other year of their existence, and they are going to go to court on every one of those regulations, and I'm going to be filing an amicus brief for the members of Congress on every one of those issues as well. So it's just going to become a battle every single day, but you are so right, and thank you for bringing up that issue. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you for what you're doing in the Senate, the Hang Up Act, the net neutrality. Those are important stuff, and you're fighting the right fight. Thank you so much for representing us. I am what you call as a high-skilled immigrant. I came from India up to 10 years back. I'm stuck in a green card backlog, an employment-based green card backlog, which is now suggested that it's going to be up to 70 years of wait to get a green card. I am entrepreneurial. I have a Master's of Science degree from Brandeis University. You talked about job creating engine. We are right here. We are ready to, we have seen the opportunities, we have seen the issues. We are ready to create jobs. We want to do it, but in the current climate, in the current law, we can't even get a promotion. So we can't even forget innovating or creating new ventures or new American jobs. We have seen the problems. We want to innovate. We want to create our own ventures. We cannot do any of those. While all this, we are relegated to a temporary status where we are one job loss away from stopping what we are doing, sell our houses, sell our cars, take our US-born kids and get out of the country. So it's a very tough space we are in. This is a dinner time conversation that we have every night between our spouses. So I want to know your thoughts on how we can fix this. There is a bill out there, both in the Congress and the Senate. In the Congress is a bill called HR 392, which has broad bipartisan support, 236 co-sponsors. And in the Senate, there's one bill called S281, which is a companion bill to HR 392. So I'm secretly hoping—
To do what?
To eliminate— so the reason we have a backlog, and thank you for that, the reason we have a backlog is because there is an arbitrary quota-based system for country of origin. When I got my green card application filed, they vetted me completely to make sure that I was being paid competitively. I was in a unique role, not displacing US workers. And then they put me in a line based on the country of origin. So basically they are looking at country caps. And I'm stuck, because it's a populous country like India, I'm stuck in a backlog which is going to span 70 plus years. The bills are going to eliminate those country cap system and make a first come, first served fair system for everyone. And I'm hoping you'll support it.
And what country are you from again, sir?
India.
From India.
Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the president has now filed. He stood as two senators have introduced legislation to cut the number of legal immigrants to the United States from 1 million a year down to 500,000 a year. cut it in half, legal immigrants. Now, this gentleman, do you have an advanced degree? This gentleman with an advanced degree is not unlike thousands and thousands of people every year in New Delhi, in Hong Kong, in Costa Rica, who have decided they would like to come to the United States legally. Now, there are 50 states. Massachusetts is the 15th most populous state. But for 30 years in a row, we have finished number 6 in legal immigration. And guess what? A high percentage of them are like this gentleman here. They're hardworking, they're well educated, and they want to be a part of the Massachusetts economy. And even the ones who don't have that level of education, they're coming here because they want to work hard and they want to do well for themselves and then for their kids. So the debate we're having right now is unfortunately not over what you're talking about. How do we get these quotas correct and how do we make sure that we have that big debate? The debate the president now wants to have is to throw all of the 11 million out of the country over here and then to cut the legals from 1 million down to 500,000. Now, since approximately 30% of all new companies in the United States are started by immigrants, job creating, businesses which they start, that doesn't seem like a good idea. When my I'll just say this little story. Of course, I support you, okay? And I will find that legislation and I will begin to work on it. When I ran for the Senate, my mother's from Malden. My father's from Lawrence. Your mother decides where your father's going to live, so he had to move to Malden. So I grew up in Malden. But my father's from Lawrence, and he thinks Lawrence is the greatest place in the whole world. And so what I did in the first week after I announced for the Senate was I went up to Lawrence to 88 Phillips Street to ring the doorbell of the first floor of the triple-decker where my father and his 4 brothers and sisters and my grandmother and grandfather lived in the shadow of the Old South Mill in Lawrence. And I really wanted to know, how did 7 people get into 1/2 of 1 floor of a triple-decker in Lawrence, the Markeys, my father, where he grew up? So the door opens, and out comes a Dominican family with their children. And the accents were different, but the aspirations the very same as existed for the Markeys. And the son of one of those people is now the United States Senator from Massachusetts. And that's something for each one of those children to aspire to be the doctor, the lawyer, the policeman, the fireman, the teacher, the nurse, whatever they want to be, the construction worker. They should have that same help, and they want to work hard. So I realize that in my own family, I am just the beneficiary of all of these hardworking people. And the way the president characterizes, denigrates all of these people, and it just is blanket insult of who they are and what they represent in our country. It's just disheartening, isn't it? It goes to the soul of the country. So I thank you, sir, for coming to India, from India to the United States. I thank you for the contributions you've made, and I thank you for the contributions that you are going to make in the future. So my staff is right around. They'll come and speak to you about that bill. So let me come over here now, ma'am.
Sarah Ahern from Greenfield, Massachusetts. As you know, sir, my family has been hit hard by the opiate epidemic. I've lost 2 cousins to unintentional drug overdose. I have 2 family members currently going through it, one in Massachusetts and one in Hawaii. Try coordinating that care. And 4 members in recovery, including myself, a grateful woman in dual recovery. I have 2 questions for you, but I wanted to make a comment about what the Reverend said. I want to echo what he said.
Can you move in the microphone? Yeah, please.
I wanted to echo what the Reverend said before I ask my 2 questions. I'd like to acknowledge that this epidemic did not start 10 years ago. This epidemic has been killing people of color for over 30 years, and there was no compassion, there was no state without stigma, there was no vigils. So I would like to take the opportunity to hold a moment of silence for all those lost.
So let us do that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for doing that.
And the other comment was about language, because that's what I do on recovery, is a language correction. When you address the epidemic as a scourge, you are calling my cousins in heavens less than, you're calling my active family members less than, and you're calling brave peers in recovery less than. It's a public health emergency, and we should be addressing it as such. So here are my 2 questions. And they're pretty simple answers, I think. Number 1, even though it's through executive order, do you support a public health emergency declaration by HHS Secretary Price, then followed by a national state of emergency by President Trump in accordance with our existing laws and constitutional amendments? And then the second question is, if this does pass, would you turn your focus to funding recovery support so the people that would access treatment through this national state of emergency would come home to peer-run recovery centers like the one I attend in Greenfield, Mass., the Recover Project, which was the first in our state, sir. And the peer recovery model has helped me in my recovery, and we in recovery get to show those in early recovery how it's done. Because even though recovery is an inside job, we all need to do this together.
So thank you, first of all, thank you for coming here, and thank you for telling us your story. And it's important for you to tell us your story and for everyone to hear it. In Massachusetts last year, 2,000 people died from opioid overdoses, and 76% of them had fentanyl in their system. We're only 2% of America's population. If you multiplied that number by 50, that would be 100,000 people who would have died if people were dying at the rate of Massachusetts, but the country's only dying at 1/3 the rate of Massachusetts. 33,000 people died last year in the whole country. 100,000 would have if they were dying at this 2,000 person rate for the 2% of the population which we represent. If we don't do something about it, 100,000 a year will die, and over 10 years, 1 million people will die from opioid overdoses. It will be 20 Vietnam Wars in 10 years in terms of the deaths of people in our country. So it is absolutely essential that we fund the prevention, the treatment of this disease. We have to treat it like a disease. I agree with you. Reverend Swan put his finger right on it. The country was blinded by the race of the people who were in this crack cocaine epidemic, and we should have responded differently, and we did not. But we can't make the same mistake again. And thus far, the debate in 2017 about healthcare has been about repealing the very programs that are already in place that aren't sufficient in order to deal with the magnitude of this historic medical problem. And so I agree with you. And we have to make sure that the president declares a national emergency. That I got a number of senators last week to co-sign a letter with me that I sent to the president saying, please declare this national emergency, because I think that will help to focus the American people on this preview of coming attractions to their own families, unless we do something now, unless we begin to intervene as a nation into this problem at a level of funding that can deal with it. And I'm proud of you for standing up here tonight, and thank you so much. You represent millions of people across the country, and your voice is needed. People have to hear your voice. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Senator Markey. Thank you for being here. I'm Liz Popolo. I am a volunteer with Voter Choice Massachusetts, a nonpartisan, nonprofit group advocating for electoral reforms. And I just want to ask about one of the very prominent reforms called ranked choice voting. You spoke earlier about the crisis of democracy that we're going through, and I agree with you on that. So as you may know, the Massachusetts Democratic Party has officially endorsed ranked choice voting through an amendment to the platform at the state convention. Ranked choice voting is an upgrade to the way that we vote, and as a voter, we would be allowed to rank our favorite candidates first, second, and third on the ballot. In case our first choice doesn't have the support, we would actually have our vote transferred to our second choice. And this means that we essentially have a backup, and it means our votes are never wasted. And we no longer will have to worry about spoiler candidates and vote splitting in our elections. And RCV, ranked choice voting, guarantees that a true majority of that true majority candidates win, meaning they have 50% support. They have a mandate from the people. And most importantly, ranked choice voting promotes party unity, which the Democrats are all about. And so, Senator Markey, I wanted just to ask very simply, do you commit to meeting with state and national advocates for ranked choice voting to discuss this important reform with us? Thank you.
Yes, I give you my commitment right now. Yes, I will do it. Thank you for being here. Thank you all back there. Thank you for doing it. Yes. So we're right at the hour that this event is supposed to end, but I think we'll go 15 minutes into overtime, if you don't mind, and I'll try to answer the questions a little bit more rapidly. So, yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Markey. It's not often I make the cut, so I appreciate that. And I hope you've been remarkably well prepared for all of these very, very questions that have been tossed your way. I hope that my request and question do not stump you tonight. I'm Reverend Tom Gerstenlauer. I represent South Congregational United Church of Christ in the center of Springfield. And I'm also representing a church that's part of an organization called the Pioneer Valley Project. PVP is an organization made up of churches, labor organizations, local community organizing committees, and we come around shared values to help develop leadership in the local communities and neighborhoods of Springfield. Represent probably close to 17,000 people. One of the things that we've recently been working on, South Congregational Church announced about 2 months ago that we are in the process of making, establishing what's called Level 1 sanctuary service for undocumented immigrants in the area. The estimates are that there are anywhere from 5,000 to 6,000 undocumented immigrants in Springfield alone. I would like to request first that you, or encourage you, to reassure the mayor, who reacted very strongly against this announcement, that none of the status of the city and any funding, federal funding, is not under threat because of actions of faith communities that are based on their faith in their community. So I'll please ask you to share that with your friend,
I will do
the
that.
mayor.
I will do that. I think your legal interpretation is most likely correct.
As I say, we have been working on it for a little while, so I feel fairly comfortable in that. But the other thing that we want to express is a concern about the deferred, what is the name of it? The Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals?
Yeah, it's called DACA.
DACA, thank you. We understand and believe we're seeing increased action toward eliminating DACA in September. This, we fear, will provide a ready-made list for what is apparently becoming a deportation machine in the United States of America. How is your office prepared to work against that, campaign against that, to thwart that activity?
Thank you. Good question.
Thank you.
Here's the good news. You are right. There's a deadline arriving. These kids are going to be vulnerable. And the good news is, in the same way John McCain was rising up on the health care bill to kill it, Lindsey Graham is now rising up to partner with Dick Durbin and myself and others in order to make sure that we protect these DACA kids. So we're going to try to create a whole list of Democrats and Republicans who will be saying to the Department of Homeland Security and to the President, no, we're going to, if you force us to, we will legislate in order to protect them. So you are right. These kids are going to be in the crosshairs. They'll have no protections, and we are going to have to legislate unless it becomes so strong as it did on the Russian sanctions that the President just decides that he doesn't want to go through the same mess again of Republicans and Democrats coming together. Because these are innocent kids who came here to our country or were, they were infants, as they arrived, and they don't know anything else other than they went to grammar school in Springfield, high school in Springfield, or Chicopee, community college over here. And if you said, we're sending you back to your country of origin, it would be like sending me back to Ireland and saying that was my country of origin. It just is absolutely inaccurate. So we'll try our best to work on that. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Senator. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you so much for doing so much for our state and for the constituents. I also stand here to kind of tell my story a little bit and seek your support, which I think you already promised. Thank you for. I'm from India as well, and I'm a postgraduate master's in computer applications. I came here 10 years back. Come October, it will be 10 years. I'm also waiting on the green card queue. I have a child who was born here. I have a child who was born in India. He came here 1.5 years, when he was 1.5 years. Both my kids know this as the country. I have done a lot to build my roots here, worked hard, day in and day out. And as the other gentleman said, we are just one job loss away from losing everything. So I actually sympathize with the lady who was saying how parents of undocumented parents are scared. We as documented are also scared, and your support and leadership can make a big change. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Yeah, thank you.
And we are going to fight for you. I will, just a brief little story. In February, I decided I would go down to Mexico City to talk with the leaders in Mexico City about their immigration policies and about this flow of fentanyl coming into our country, into Springfield, Massachusetts, into Holyoke, into Chicopee, all across the Northeast. Then I flew up with a couple of other senators. We went up to the El Paso Juarez border to see how that border was being administered in terms of immigrants coming into our country. And then I got on a plane and flew to Logan Airport. And the plane landed at 11:15, and I got off the plane, and I had to get a cab to go to Malden, so I went over to the cab stand, and these guys just started coming at me. And so there were a bunch of Somalis. And they said, and they recognized me, and they wanted to talk to me about what the president was saying about deporting people. And so I said, okay, one of you will drive me to Malden right now. So in the car, I learned that he's got an accounting degree. He's from Mogadishu. If he stayed in Mogadishu, he's the person that they're trying to kill. And that he came to Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts, because he felt that would be a welcoming place, and that all of his other friends there had advanced degrees like him. And that Justin Trudeau, the week before, had said, and if the United States doesn't want you, we will take you in Canada. And then he said to me that two of his friends were going to get in a car the next day and drive up to the Canadian border, people with master's degree in engineering. Do we have too many engineering masters in America? These are hardworking people. They are not coming to our country because they want to leave Somalia or leave any of these other countries. It's because they weren't doing so great. I'm not sure, I don't think my grandmother and grandfather were doing so great in Ireland. The people who were doing great stayed. The people who were not and wanted to work hard, those are the ones who left, right? And so this is not the message, that we should be sending. The message should be that we're going to find a way that legally an immigration system will be created in our country that makes it possible for families to be able to stay here. So thank you, sir. I appreciate it for getting up. And I'm going to have to speed up my answers even more. Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to thank you for your continued support of the VA as someone who served. What you're looking at right here is a seizure face plant into my floor, broke the nose, everything. Without the VA, I would be really boned right now. And so thank you for your continued support. If I'm not mistaken, you have done legislation with the Wall Street people, have you not, sir? The Wall Street people, you have done legislation in regards to finances or economics? Wall Street, I'm someone who is concerned that Dodd-Frank is going to be repealed. I'd like to see Glass-Steagall put back into place.
Okay, so I did not vote to repeal Glass-Steagall, and I will fight to the death to make sure that Dodd-Frank is not repealed. Okay, so I am one of a handful of people who did not vote to repeal Glass-Steagall.
Thank you.
To a very large extent, I will just say this: President Trump right now is enjoying. What he did was on January 20th was he got in the front seat of a single owner of a very nice and very well-maintained economic engine of a car that had for 78 consecutive months showed economic growth and a rise in the stock market. And now he's in the front seat of this very well-maintained used car, and he's claiming credit for it rising the stock market and lowering the unemployment rate. You know what a tough job is? I'll tell you what a tough job is, to be Barack Obama and George Bush has just left you the biggest economic mess since the Great Depression. That's a mess, okay? That is a mess. And I will tell you something else. When George Bush left, it eventually went to 10% unemployment by the time the whole thing played out, and the stock market went down to 6,500. That's what Barack Obama inherited, 6,500 on the Dow and 10% unemployment. When he walked out the door on January 20th of 2017, here's what Barack Obama left: 19,000 on the Dow, almost a tripling, and unemployment went from 10% down to 4.8%. So what Trump is trying to get credit for is moving the unemployment rate from 4.8 to 4.3. Try moving it from 10 down to 4.8. Exactly. That's hard work. That's getting the car out of the ditch, getting it overhauled, and putting it back on the road again. And so Dodd-Frank is a big part of that. Having rules of the road, making sure that the Wall Street doesn't turn into a casino, making sure that the banks keep the proper amount of capital, making sure that this economic system works in a way that allows for people to trust it and for it not to be undermined. That's what we have to do. I agree with you on Glass-Steagall. I agree with you on Dodd-Frank. Thank you for coming tonight. Yes, yes, sir.
The middle class has not had a raise in like 15 years, and a lot of that is because of the payroll tax, which is 15% on our income. So when we make 40 grand, we pay 6 grand to the federal government just on the payroll tax. Why is this not being discussed in Congress as a way of boosting middle class wages? Just eliminating the payroll tax. You know, you can raise it on capital gains, you could put the tax on Wall Street speculation, you know, sales tax on stocks, sale tax on real estate, keep rents down, but nobody will even talk about how the guy making 50 grand a year pays $7,500 in just in payroll tax, not even income tax. So why isn't this talked about? Why isn't it even brought up?
Well, you are right. On your larger point, you are right on the money. There has been a higher and higher and higher and higher percentage of the wealth that's created in our country gravitating up to the top 2 percentile over the last 40 years. It is absolutely true. And even as the president is debating tax breaks right now, their proposal is that a huge percentage of it will go to the upper 1 percentile, the upper 2 percentile. And what I'm saying to you is, I think the point which you're raising is a very good one. Okay, it's a very good one. It goes right to, you know, this issue of economic equality or economic justice, we'll put it like that. But as you know, the payroll tax goes to Social Security, Medicare, so, you know, ensuring that the social insurance system does work and that it is funded going forward for generations to come. So that's the kind of debate that we should be having. How would we finance that retirement system, that medical system going forward. I'm agreeing with you, sir, okay? And I will try to inject that into the debate as it unfolds. Okay, thank you, sir, and thank you for coming tonight. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Senator Markey. My name is Tracy Whitfield. I'm running for City Council at large.
Great.
So I wanted to talk about the manufacturing industry. The manufacturing industry. However, we have a young man here, Trayvon, that's 17 years old, and I would like to give him my turn and a chance to speak.
Come on over to this microphone. Is he related to you? Are you related?
No.
Okay, good.
But he is on my campaign team. He's part of the
Okay,
Young
good.
Mass
So come on
Dems, and
over.
I want him to talk.
Come on over.
Hi, Ed Markey. I am Trayvon Smith. I go to Sapis International Charter School. I'm part of Ward 5. One of the pivotal points that I wanted to bring up
What
is...
year are you in?
I'm a senior.
You look like you're a senior in college, by the way, just so you know. As all the rest of us are looking at you. Yes, go ahead.
I am a black African-American male, and I keep myself very busy as a part of Tracy's campaign, student council, Massachusetts High School Democrat, president of all these different things, and China Li Ching-Vong sitting there is also on the state committee of Mass High School Democrats. It's very rare to find a black African-American male who keeps himself out of trouble and keeps himself busy, especially with the drug crisis that we have going on. So the question I'm asking you is, what can you do to not only raise youth activism in politics, but to link that to the drug crisis we have into Massachusetts and possibly raise youth activism to the point where children can realize that you don't have to turn to drugs in order to find freedom?
Okay, no, my belief is, and you can comment on this if you want, you can have your own microphone, is that we have to put the education on drugs down at the earliest possible age. Not 15 or 16, that's too late. Not 14, that's too late. What year would you pick to begin drug education?
Kindergarten.
Kindergarten. So it has to just keep going down so that the message is delivered at the earliest possible age so that it can be reinforced at home, so that kids hear this message that drugs are too dangerous and could and probably will ruin your life. So I thank you for standing up because I think you're right. We have to have a better way of dealing with this issue in the country. We have to be more honest about the education that we have to give to kids. When I was 12, my father said to me he knew that I was probably going to start smoking when I was 12 because he had started smoking when he was 12. And he didn't want me to smoke, but he said, I know you probably will. And my father died of lung cancer. But 12 was even late, back when I was a kid. So I think you're right, and I think we need to incorporate a better way of having public health messages on the most important issues, obesity, childhood obesity, and drugs delivered at the very earliest ages so that they're aware of what the consequences are. And I thank you for your leadership, and we're all going to look forward. We all are going to say we met you in the early years, because you're going to be somebody big. We just don't know what it is that you're going to do. Thank you. Okay, come on over here. And I see 5 people, by the way, all wearing the same jerseys for one question at the very end. So I think that, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we have 5 more questions, and I'll try to finish up quickly. Yes, sir.
Good evening, Senator Markey. My name is Jesse Letterman. Thank you for being here and for going into overtime. I'm here tonight as the Director of Public Health and Environmental Initiatives for an organization in Springfield called Arise for Social Justice. And thank you. And as you can tell, Arise has a 30-year history here in the city working on criminal justice issues, housing issues, and more recently on public health and environmental issues. We coordinate a 40-member coalition called the Springfield Climate Justice Coalition that's been able to do some great work in Springfield, from developing with the city a climate action plan, working with Columbia Gas to fix 500 gas leaks, and fighting with residents of the North End for the repairs needed to Harena School. You've touched on this a little bit, but something very near and dear to our hearts is, what are we going to do in the face of the budget cuts that Trump has proposed at the EPA for cities like Springfield, Lawrence, Lowell, Holyoke, especially in states that, unlike Massachusetts, don't have strong DEPs at the state level?
First of all, we're going to block the cuts in the budget for those agencies. That's what we're going to do. We start right there. We'll make sure that they're not allowed to cut that funding, and increasingly those are our conversations with many Republicans on those issues, on education issues. Many Republicans don't want to defund the National Endowment of the Arts or the humanities or all the way down these different agencies. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't many Republicans who want to turn EPA into every polluter's ally. They do, and that's to reduce the budget so dramatically that its effectiveness is compromised in a significant way. But first and foremost, we have to make sure that the funding stays there at these agencies. And we are right now partnering towards achieving that goal, notwithstanding what Donald Trump might want to do to cut the EPA budget by 31%, or to cut the Department of Energy budget by 18%. Because here's the pipelines under Chicopee, Holyoke, and Springfield are like 100 years old. There's natural gas that's leaking out every single day. What would be a great public works project? To put people to work repairing all these pipes. You'd save $1 billion a year in natural gas that's just seeping out and up into the atmosphere, making the consumers have to pay more and the climate more dangerous. And that's what I'm saying to you, that is a smarter way of going that creates jobs, saves money for consumers, and protects the planet simultaneously. So that 1, 2, 3 that you're advocating is what I believe in, and if we can do anything, it will be just to make sure there's enough funding that continues, because those are the pipelines that actually would be the most cost-effective to have tens of thousands of people working on in every city and town, not just in Massachusetts, but across the whole country. So thank you for being here. Yes, sir?
Senator Markey, thank you so much for your time. Brian Sullivan, I'm the Director of Public Relations for Addiction Campuses, and we operate Swift River out in Cummington. I'll try to be very quick, but I wanted to know, I'm sure you're aware of lawsuits that are popping up all across the country in different states, holding large pharmaceutical companies accountable for unethical marketing practices that took place in the 90s when they spent money on lobbying and they encouraged doctors to overprescribe. Is my first question, it's a twofold question. One is, do you support legislation, and is there any type of legislation that can be enacted to hold these big pharma companies that participated in those unethical marketing practices accountable on a federal level? And the second question, I'm sure you're aware of the Associated Press's report that was released late last year on the Pain Care Forum lobby and how they spent more money in Congress in 2015 than the gun lobby. Is there any type of legislation that can be passed to say, while we're in this epidemic, we're not going to take money from these makers of painkillers?
Okay. Unfortunately, as long as this Supreme Court is in place, all of that money being contributed will be considered to be free speech. That is how the Roberts Court has interpreted all of those contributions. On the issue of, and that's why we need Democrats to control the Senate and a Democrat in the White House so we can name people to the Supreme Court who will have no longer this bizarre interpretation that money is speech, because that's the world that we live in, and that's the core of the crisis in democracy that we have in the country, where there's just too much money sloshing around, affecting the way in which our democratic institutions operate. On the first one, actually Pharma was already sued, I'm not Pharma, Purdue Pharma, which created OxyContin in 1996 on the false premise that it was not addictive when they knew that it was. They've already paid a $650 million fine, but I do believe it is absolutely right and just that private citizens banding together in a citizen action should be able to sue them for the harm which they were done to their families, in the same way that the tobacco industry had to accept all these lawsuits. And ultimately, that kind of accountability goes right to the heart of the way in which our legal system should work. People's families were harmed. You should be able to bring a suit. And when they were successful, it began to fundamentally change the relationship between tobacco and the American people. I think we need the same thing to happen on opioids. Yes, ma'am. Thank you for coming.
Hi, Senator. My name's Aya Rhoda. I have more of a statement. On behalf of the 120,000 people in the Commonwealth living with Alzheimer's disease, I'd like to thank you for making Alzheimer's a priority in Washington. There are currently 120,000 people in Massachusetts living with the disease, and this number is expected to climb to 150,000 by the year 2020. Alzheimer's is really a public health crisis. In fact, 50% of people with Alzheimer's disease aren't even diagnosed, and of the 50% who are diagnosed, less than half are even told of their diagnosis. And I'd like to thank the Massachusetts legislature for their work on this with the Physicians Education Bill. And I'd also like to thank you for your leadership on the Hope for Alzheimer's Act.
So what is your relationship with the disease?
So my grandfather had Alzheimer's
Your
disease and passed away from it, yes.
And what country was he from?
We're Lebanese by
Lebanese,
origin,
yeah.
Alzheimer's is the most expensive disease in America, and now for the first time, because of the Hope for Alzheimer's Act, people living with the disease will be able to bill Medicare for comprehensive care planning services. And I'd also like to thank you for your vote to increase research funding, and this increase in research funding is a positive and collaborative message, but we need to keep fighting. Alzheimer's isn't a red or a blue issue, it's purple. And we need to keep working together to find a cure. So I want to thank you for all that you've done, and to ask you to please keep fighting for us.
Thank you for being here. And thank you for speaking for your grandfather. So right now, 5 million Americans have Alzheimer's right now, as we're in this room, 5 million. By the time all the baby boomers have retired, 15 million people will have Alzheimer's in America. By the time the last baby boomer retires, 15 million. Last year, $236 billion worth of federal money was spent on Alzheimer's patients, Medicare or Medicaid in our country. By the time all the baby boomers have retired, the Alzheimer's budget will be bigger than the defense budget. So right now, defense is about $600 billion. Alzheimer's is $230 billion, just in taking care of those patients. So failure is not an option. We have to find the cure. My mother was president of the senior class and the smartest girl in the class, and she contracted Alzheimer's. And my mother passed away from Alzheimer's. My father and my mother had to raise, when my grandmother died, my mother was a junior in high school, so she didn't get to go to college, so she had to raise her 3 younger sisters. So by the time she finished, she was 37, my father was the milkman, he was 33, and so she married a milkman. So it was like the valedictorian and a milkman. That's the living room in which I grew up. And when my mother got Alzheimer's, my father said, "You know, Eddie, if the strength of your brain determined who got Alzheimer's, your mother would be taking care of me right now," meaning him. Because she was a genius. She used to do calculus for fun, even though she never had it at the kitchen table. And so he kept my mother in the living room for 13 years, never stepped foot in a nursing home. And when I would say to my father, "What do you think about Ma going to a nursing home?" my father would say, "Eddie, it was an honor that your mother married me. Your mother is never stepping foot in a nursing home. That was an honor." Okay, so I see this issue, and what I was able to do and thank you for raising that issue, I was able to pass a lot of Alzheimer's laws over the years, but in 2010, one was the National Alzheimer's Plan. That is that the NIH had to actually put together a plan for finding the cure for Alzheimer's by the year 2025, and they had to break down all of the different silos at NIH to share all of the information about brains, whether it was over here in brain cancer or Parkinson's or autism, and just break it down and just share all this information about brains so that we could telescope the time frame. And NIH had to announce a plan, which they did in 2012. So that was pursuant to my law. Then in 2012, I passed a different law, which is that NIH then had to tell us how much federal money had to go into Alzheimer's research every year in order to find the cure by 2025, which they now have to send up the number. And then that number almost always now is set into the budget because failure is not an option. President Kennedy set as a goal putting a man on the moon and returning him safely in 8 years when I was a boy. In 2017, it's not the mission to the moon, it's the mission to the mind. It's the last great unexplored part of this planet. And failure is not an option, to use a phrase used by Tom Hanks in what movie was that? Yeah, but so it's a critical issue, and if we don't find the cure for Alzheimer's, we will never be able to balance the federal budget. It will be impossible. I'll tell you why. Because no one's going to vote to throw grandma out of a nursing home. And 2/3 of all people in nursing homes are on Medicaid. 2/3 of all people in nursing homes are on Medicaid because people don't live in homes that can afford $70,000 or $80,000 for a nursing home year after year with Alzheimer's. Okay, so it's not an option. And so we come over here, sir. We ask. You get the final single question before we get the group question, which is coming. So go ahead.
How are you doing, Senator Markey? I saw you a couple months ago at First Churches in Northampton. It's good to see you again.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Okay. So my name is Manny Pintado. I wear many hats. However, today I will say I'm a member of the International Socialist Organization in Western.
Can you just slow down just a little?
Okay.
Okay.
I'm a member of the International Socialist Organization in Western Massachusetts and also the Rapid Response Team from Western Massachusetts, which means we are against immigration deportations. And I'm going to follow something what my comrade, Mr. Rodriguez, said. She said very eloquently, but you know, Senator, that 19 people have died only this year in immigration holding cells. We need to stop funding this creation of these immigration holding cells. Also, as you know, there are many states that want to pass SB 4, which is Senate Bill 4. Governor Baker has been introducing, actually straight to two immigration proposals. One is to go and arrest an immigrant at his home without a court order. That is unconstitutional. That's what the Massachusetts Supreme Court said. Second, police can hold for an extra 12 hours a person without due process until ICE arrives. Well, what I would say to you, Senator Markey, is if SB 4 is passed in Massachusetts, we will fight Charlie Baker by whatever means necessary. I'm quoting my brother leader, Malcolm X, because we all have seen the Holocaust movies, okay? What are we gonna do? First is going to be tests, one's going to be patches next. I mean, we've seen these documentaries, and we did not do anything to stop it because it was too late. So I'm going to tell you straight up, if I will not let another Holocaust happen on my lifetime. Thank you.
What country are you from, sir? I'm American. No, but which country did you come from?
Oh, I came from Buenos Aires, Argentina.
From Buenos Aires. Okay, great, beautiful. Thank you, sir. So thank you for getting up. That was a very eloquent statement. And again, it just goes to this larger question of how we're going to be treating immigrants in our society. And, you know, it begins with Donald Trump with his Muslim ban, which is unfair, un-American, unconstitutional, and has to be fought every single step of the way. And we just have to make it clear that we have the resolve to stand up and protect that phrase at the bottom. Which is why, because of the arbitrariness of the countries that were selected, it is unconstitutional, and that is why he keeps having problems and putting it on the books. So I thank you, sir, for getting up. And now we come to the final question. I think all of you should get up to the microphone at the same time. So everybody up.
Hi, I'm Monica Davidson, and I come
This is like, you know, this is like on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, you know, where this is like ask the audience, okay? So this is going to be a collective opinion, and we're going to give it great weight because of that.
I'm a client of the Arc of Opportunity out in Western Massachusetts, which is they support the disability people with disabilities and help us with everyday living. From what I know and have heard, is that Trump is trying to stop the programs that helps us be able to do stuff during the day. Taking our food stamps away from us, which we can't support ourselves because we have physical disabilities that we cannot do to work. So what are you guys going to do to, sorry for crying, help give the people with disabilities a place to go so they can work like they want to every day and not take it away from us?
So, yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Donald. I voted the right way for Clinton and Al Gore, and things go around with my other friends and the other people there. I fought the women's rights, and the women's rights should be heard. And the women's rights should be coming in and taking office in the country. And about time we talk about this and get the country back in track, and we could get the country honest. I want to be honest with you. You be honest with me. I could get the country back with the people and get it all together. No fighting. Let's get our money back, and let's get the pharmacists taking over and putting it up high with our money, and we don't know what to pay for. Now, you get 3 or 4 kids and they're sick, and we don't know what things we're getting for the kids or whatever. About time you guys in the White House did Donald right, and Donald Trump need to be voted out of the White House.
Hi, my name is Ina Thibodeau from the ARC of North Central. We're here to fight for Medicaid. My question is, where do you stand for that so we can be healthy and what we do best?
Hi, my name is Mike. I'm part of the ARC. Yeah, I'm also concerned about programs for the ARC funded for people like us. I am in a group home. I'm worried about my staff losing their job and everything, and also losing my insurance, and also I get benefits every month to help pay for my rent, my food, my clothes, and I've also submitted an application to my father's disabilities, and I'm afraid that we may end up losing it if it goes through, and I want to stop it from not going through and everything, so that I have a place to live, and so that other people can have a place to live and insurance and everything, and I want that I want it to be stopped.
Hi, my name is Roxana Mays. I'm a staff person from the Arc of Opportunity, and we're basically here to show that disabilities have many different faces. We're also here to also show that it's a fundamental human right for a person with disabilities to be fully included within any community. As you can see, they're affected in many ways, not only because of the physical disability, but also financial, health care.
Thank you. So let me just say this. When we cast that vote on health care, if Donald Trump had been successful, it would have been the single biggest step in rolling back disability rights in 50 years. If they had been successful in taking a machete to Medicaid and slashing that program, all of these programs for the disability community in our country would have been slashed, and it would have been a rollback of unprecedented dimensions. We've come a long way as a country in understanding who's entitled to medical care and what kind of help people should be able to receive in our society. That was not reflected in what this bill was that was being advanced. Okay? So when I was on the floor of the Senate and speaking, I kept mentioning this issue, that it would be the single greatest rollback in disability rights in generations. And what I have tried to do throughout my career, I was the chairman over the telecommunications industries for many years. And so what I did in 1990 was I passed the law for closed captioning on television sets. And what I was able to do in 1990 was to mandate that every wireless device sold in America be accessible to the deaf and the blind, so that they would be able to use this device in the same way that Annie Sullivan taught Helen Keller how to read and write by using the palm of her hands. Well, we moved to the era of the Palm Pilot and now to the iPhone. And so this device is just as absolutely essential in the 21st century as those earlier forms of communication were. So not only is this device now accessible to all deaf and blind in the United States, but every other deaf and blind person in the world. And it also is accessible for every device as well. And there was a conference 2 years ago down in Washington where 200 companies from around the world came because they're now manufacturing all of these devices. And so it's a whole new industry that says maybe when you think about people with disabilities, maybe we should think more about how we're going to unlock all of their God-given abilities, okay? And that was just the opposite of what Donald Trump's health care bill was doing 2 weeks ago on the floor of the United States Senate. It was a crime against what we know we have a responsibility to do. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for being Western Massachusetts. Thank you for everything that you do to make our state the best state. Not just the Bay State, the brain state. That's what I try to represent on the floor of the Senate every single day. Thank you all so much for being here.